done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
A very good morning at 7 minutes after 8 o'clock and into the final moments of conversation getting into this weekend. And even as we do, we're getting into the weekend whereby you want to think about what you're going to do for mum. You know what I've realized? The best Mother's Day gifts, they're not the loudest. They're the ones that show we get her. Woolworths is making it easier to say, I see you, mum, with 30% off women's knitwear and sleepwear available in store right now until the 11th of May. Think of that one soft sweater she always reaches for when the weather turns. Like I did that this morning. I went to get my jacket and I saw the sweater that my mum has left here. And I looked at it and I was like, yeah, that's the idea that we're talking about. Or those comfy sleep sets that somehow make everything feel a bit calmer at night. Woolies has all that and more. The quality, the comfort, the elegance, all in one place. And let's be honest, no one deserves a day off and a little spoiling more than mum. So why not give her the softest hug in the form of something she'll wear and love every day? Head over to Woolworths and make this Mother's Day feel as special as she is. T's and C's applies. Woolworths, the difference. So this morning, we're going to get into a conversation that's going to take us back in history. It takes us back in history, but it is very important when it comes to things that we're dealing with today. And it is not lost on us, the irony, that just yesterday, a new IEBC chair was nominated by the president after two names were handed over to him by the selection panel. So joining us in the studio in the hot seat this morning is former CEO of the IEBC, Major James Oswago. Major, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I think I'm doing fine.
You think?
You think?
I suppose.
You suppose.
Suppose I'm doing fine.
I suppose. Well, I suppose you're doing fine too.
Thank you.
So we're going to be looking at a number of issues this morning.
All right.
One of the big issues that rocked the IEBC some years ago while you were there was the Chicken Gate scandal. And that came to, well, I'm going to go into details of that after this in a minute. But let's welcome you and, now go beyond supposing that you're doing all right and get you to settle down. That Dennis is going to share with you the proverb. He'll tell you where it's from. And then you can do us an interpretation before we get into things.
Again.
Yes. And today's proverb comes from Tunisia, a country of around 12 million people. And Tunisia is an interesting country. It's a country that speaks Arab, but French as well. And French is used in academia, medical, and in business places in the country. And some of the historical significance of the country, we have the ancient Carthage, which is founded in the 9th century BC. Carthage was a major power in the ancient Mediterranean world. Its ruins now a UNESCO heritage. Another UNESCO heritage is the Medina of Tunis, and this is a UNESCO World Heritage Site featuring over 700 historic monuments, including mosques, places, and fountains. Plus, they have the couscous cuisine. When you visit Tunisia, go enjoy the couscous cuisine, then you'll tell us how that tastes, right?
This is like ugali.
It's now ugali, but for Tunisia.
Not
Yes.
really. It's more like rice. It's a little bit more like, it's a loose grain, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now it is ugali for Kenya. That's our staple now.
But it's their staple.
Yes. Now, our proverb today, a bold woman boasts of her sister's hair. A bold woman boasts of her sister's hair. What do you make of that?
You mean bold in the sense hairless?
No, not bold,
like
but bold.
Instead of courage.
Yes.
Yes.
Boast of?
Her sister's hair.
Maybe humility.
Meaning?
Maybe something to do with humility. That you recognize what the other person has, even though you don't have it. You love yourself as much as you love the next person. And I leave it there before I go wrong.
Okay.
You never go wrong with the proverb. It's
Where I
how
go.
you interpret it.
If I go
Yes.
drastically wrong and I get dismissed. Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, it's great to hear that you can be so confident in your own that, you're not shy of letting other people know that you appreciate or you compliment them. Confidence in that you have. All right. So many things are happening in the country at the moment. Finally, one would say, we have now the nomination from the president from the 2 names that were given to him by the selection panel for the IEBC chair, and the 9 names that were given to him for the commissioners, of which, a number of those then will be sent to Parliament, or have already been, for them to deliberate. Now, even as that is happening, so many things are coming out as a result of that, which we'll have a discussion about later. But we want to go a little bit into history, and we want to look at one of the things that rocked the IEBC. And it seems that as though, a number of things have rocked the IEBC as we have, come into this new commission, which was constitutionally assigned from 2010 in terms of how it was going to operate. And one of those things that rocked the IEBC was a Chicken Gate scandal. Chicken Gate actually was not something that was found here in Kenya. That chicken was a code name that was given, or that was used in terms of who was paying who for what to happen. And the only way Kenya knew about it is when investigators from the UK said, hang on a minute, something is going on here, and brought it to the attention of Kenyans and the Kenyan government. And essentially what they were looking at was a multi-million shilling corruption scam that acquired the tag Chicken Gate, and it took the rightful place in what many are calling the Hall of Shame. That if there were many on the list, that Chicken Gate then would be one of them. There was an audit, and they were talking about various deals involving executives and Kenya's managers that puts to shame such agencies such as the DCI and the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. At the time that Chicken Gate happened, Major, you were at the helm of the IEBC. We want to get a little bit of an understanding from an inside perspective of what happened during that time. Let's open it up a little bit, because it hasn't really been opened up one-to-one conversations. So, what happened?
Thank you. Sometimes I want to narrate to you 2 incidents about Chicken Gate by way of preamble. Sometimes as we were moving towards the election of 2017, I read an editorial, I think it was in one of the major newspapers, the legacy newspapers. And the editorialist was looking at those things that, if not resolved satisfactorily, would compromise the election of 2017. And the editorialist listed 1 or 2 things. One of those things that editorialist listed was Chicken Gate. And if you are dropped in Kenya from Mars, you would imagine that this is such a huge thing that, if not resolved, would have the potential to nullify or neutralize the election 2017. And I wondered, what is Chicken Gate? Although I was involved, I wonder, what is Chicken Gate? And for the first time, it occurred to me that there is a version of Chicken Gate in the news media and another reality of it. That was the first time, although I was involved in it. The second time was about 1.5 years ago. I was watching news, primetime news, and this is Citizen TV. And the anchor or the presenter was Jeff Koinange and the lady Victoria Rubadiri. And Rubadiri was giving a presentation. And she was saying, or she was tasked to give a report on why the disposal of the Chicken Gate case in court was taking so long when the one in UK had been expeditiously disposed of. And one of the things she mentioned as I was watching was that one of the reasons why the disposal of chicken in Kenya was not expeditious was because James Oswago had lost a daughter.
Okay.
Now, it is true I had lost my daughter, and that somebody I loved and named after my mother. But my daughter, at the time she was dying, she was an adult, and she was married. She had become a Muslim. And she died in a tragic accident around 11 o'clock. And because she was a Muslim by conversion, I learned that she would be buried the following day. And there were so many conflicting emotions going on in my mind, because my tradition is to bury one way, and her new religion conceives of burial and things in another way. And I conceded, and we buried her the following day. So I was wondering, what has the death of my daughter, who died and was buried the following day, to do with the delayed disposal of a trial that had taken 8 years? It again occurred to me that perhaps this is something that needs an explanation. But at times you get overwhelmed by some of these things. You don't know where to start, and you don't know what to say. So, Chicken Gate.
Yes.
I consulted before. I'm a lawyer, but I also consulted before I came here. And the advice that I got is I should be careful not to go into sub judice issue, because this thing has not been disposed of.
Okay.
So there are things that I would have wanted to say which I may not go into, because the case is still sub judice.
Okay.
So I'll just talk or mention some of those things that to help to explain what it was all about.
Right.
Now, you said this was a multi-million shilling scandal.
Yes, as I think of all the captions, all the headlines that we saw, the snapshots,
Thank you.
multi-million,
Yes.
multiple deals, inflation,
Yes.
Because even we talk about around 53 million shillings that allegedly was paid to Kenyan officials.
It's
Yes.
multi-million.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So now, the first question is, how much is Chicken Gate? If you read the Kenyan media, particularly the Standard and the Nation and the Star, the figures range from 40 to 50 million. So, and Chicken Gate happened in 2009. I joined IEBC in 2010. So by the time Chicken Gate happened, I had not joined IEBC. But the figure that I've had mentioned in the press is between 40 and 50 million. So let's take 50 million. I'm saying 50 million because you have said that it has been audited. I'm not aware of any instance when the issue of Chicken Gate had been audited, either by the Auditor General or even by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. I have never come across, and I'm sure there is none. So it has not been audited, and I would be glad to be disabused of that. But to the best of my knowledge, this has not been audited either by the Auditor General or by the Parliamentary Accounts Committee.
Let's look at the merits or the elements of this particular issue. That the issues that were brought forward was that allegedly that there were members of what was then called the defunct IEBC that received kickbacks for printing materials that was happening in the UK, for which those materials would then come to Kenya for the purposes of the election. Now, what we're talking about now is that these prices were inflated to the tune of 38%, right? Were these just allegations? Where would anybody get this from if it was just theory, Major?
So it is important to give the long story. Allow me to start from 2008. Election Commission of Kenya gets disbanded. In 2009, IIEC, that is Interim Independent Election Commission, gets formed. And it got formed somewhere in April 2009. When these commissioners were sworn and went to the offices and advisory towers, they found nobody except APs. Because when Electoral Commission was disbanded, everybody was sent home from commissioner to sweepers. So they asked for staff to be seconded from central government. And they got around 20 or 30 staff. 2 months later, before they settled in, they were asked to do a by-election, 2 by-elections. Those 2 by-elections were in a place, constituency called Sinyalu and Bomachoge. When the speaker asks you to do a by-election, you must do it in 90 days. So the commissioners found themselves, they had hardly settled, but they are now being asked to do a by-election, which they had to do. Now, it takes about between 3 to 5 months to do an international contract. So what did they do? They went back to the lowest supplier which had supplied IEBC, ECK. That company was called Smith and Usman.
Yes.
So they brought Smith and Usman to supply them with the ballot papers for the by-election in Sinyalu and Bomachoge. And you must remember that the entire chicken gate relates to only those 2 by-elections, Sinyalu and Bomachoge. So if there was inflation of ballot papers, Sinyalu and Bomachoge, the total number of ballot papers for Sinyalu and Bomachoge would not be 100, maybe around 40, maybe around 90 something thousand. All right? Total number of ballot papers plus everything else. But as they were procuring this, they were dealing with the agent of the company called Smith and Usman. The agent of Smith and Usman had a habit that whenever he met senior staff, he would write to his bosses in London and would say, I met so-and-so, and I met so-and-so. And you say, these people are hungry, they require small chicken. I met so-and-so, they are willing to give us this contract, but they require something chicken. He would meet them 2 or 3 times. He meets members of what were then called the tender committee because they didn't have staff. And he would say they need some small chicken. Now, these were in emails that the agent sent to his bosses in London.
Yes.
I have read every single one of those emails. There are about 30. In those emails, they are all originated from the agent to his bosses, not copied to the people who are mentioned. But they were mentioning people liberally. I met the tender committee, so and so and so and so, they need chicken. Or I met so and so. Amongst the people mentioned were commissioners and even the chairman was mentioned in that list.
Yes.
They were mentioned by the agent who said, I've met so and so, and they require some small chicken. In those emails, there was nothing like saying, we have negotiated, or I'm going to pay, or an indication of what was this chicken. Was this 3%, 5%, 60%? You mentioned 30%.
38, actually.
38%.
Yeah.
I have read all the 30 emails or so. You will not find where the percentage is mentioned, number one. Number two, but where do you find this email? Because it is good for Kenyans to know how to access them. If you go to the website of Smith and Usman or Serious Fraud Office, type Regina and Smith and Usman. Regina is like, that's how they report the cases.
Yes.
Yeah. Regina and Smith and Usman, or you go to the website of Serious Fraud Office. Serious Fraud Office is the organization that investigated this thing.
Yes.
If you go to their website and type Smith and Usman, they'll take you to the trial. Or if you go to Crown trials, in England, all the trials are done by the Crown prosecutions. Now, if you go to the Crown prosecution's website, you also get that. You go to that site. And you will get a stash of about 150, 200 pages. In all those documents, you can download it. I did download it. And I would prefer that anybody who is interested should do the downloading so that you read it yourself.
I need to ask, the agent who was then giving information back to his boss in London, would it appear that he was doing this by way of mere reporting of his activities here? Because now essentially we're saying there was no email that said that we have then negotiated and we have agreed to give them X amount of money. But that he's saying that as we have gone along in our procedure, X person has requested that we give them chicken.
There was nothing like requested.
Okay.
In all those emails, and I would encourage you to read the emails because you won't get them from the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission.
No.
If they have them, they have not given them to me. But the one I've read are the ones I've accessed myself.
Okay.
And this is public domain. Anybody can access them. And it is important that we access them so that we know the truth. If you read all those emails, and I've told you there are between 20, maybe up to 30, 20 something there. There is not one email where this person says, I met so-and-so and we agreed on 10%. I met so-and-so and we agreed on 2 bob.
That's why there was a code name, chicken.
Yes, it was. But you see, chicken can be 50%. Chicken can be 2%.
Right.
He was saying, I've met so-and-so and they need some small chicken.
Okay.
This individual had a contract with his bosses, which said if he acquires businesses, he would be reimbursed for the cost of acquiring those businesses. So in any case, he was entitled to something for acquiring these businesses. So he would say, this is small chicken. Now, in all these years, Smith and Usman was doing security contracting in Africa to about 12 countries or more.
Yes.
Kenya was just one of them. And for all those years, there have been complaints by the competitors to Serious Fraud Office that Smith and Usman was getting businesses and retaining business by way of corruption. So for years, Smith and Usman was secretly investigating Smith and Usman.
They were investigating,
office.
the fraud office was investigating Smith and Usman.
Not only for the operation in Kenya, but in all of Africa.
Okay.
And through the investigations that they were doing is where the term chicken
I'll
in
get
regard to IE.
I'll get there.
Okay.
So they were investigating. When Serious Fraud Office investigates an issue like that, they'll do it for years, even decades. No, you'll never know. So they had done it for some time. At one point, the Serious Fraud Office came to the conclusion that indeed Smith and Usman were corrupt in Africa. And when they came to that conclusion that Smith and Usman were corrupt in Africa, they then raided the offices of Smith and Usman in London.
Okay.
When they raided the offices and carted away computers, it is in those computers that the Serious Fraud Office now discovered this stash of correspondence that I'm talking to you about.
Okay. For purposes of clarity,
Yes.
Smith and Usman is the company in the United Kingdom then that received the contract for printing election materials that would come to Kenya.
Yes.
All right.
And it didn't start in 2009. They had got it from 2007 and earlier. Smith and Usman was also the company that printed
Neck papers.
neck papers
Yes.
for examination.
For exams, yes.
And they were in about maybe 12 or more countries in Africa. So here, it is a Serious Fraud Office get the suspicion that Smith and Usman are corrupt. They investigate, they cut these computers. Eventually, Smith and Usman is prosecuted in London. When they were prosecuted, there were about 6 charges. And they were found guilty. Now, you can be taken to court for 5 counts and found guilty in 1 or in 5. Amongst the charges that they had related to the operation in Kenya, the operation in Malawi, the operation in Ghana, the operation in some place called Somaliland, and crucially, the operation in a country called Mauritania. It is important to listen to the case about Mauritania. Now, let me take some time on Mauritania. Why is Mauritania important? Because that is the reason why they were actually convicted. What happened in Mauritania? In Mauritania, at about the same time, Mauritania is a democracy and is a country in Northwest Africa.
Yes.
They had a general election. Smith and Usman supplied the ballot papers.
Yes.
But the contract for the supply of ballot papers was negotiated by the minister who was then responsible for elections. And the election was done. Shortly after the election was done, Smith and Usman sent money direct to an account in Paris. That account was run by two ladies. The account was in the name of the minister, but was operated by his two daughters. So in court, Smith and Usman was presented with this reality that you send this money from your own account to this account in Paris. The account holder was the minister who negotiated for the supply of ballot papers in Mauritania. And Smith and Usman was tried before a jury. And the jury concluded that there was no other rational explanation for this direct transfer from Smith and Usman to the account in Paris except graft.
Okay.
It is for that reason and that reason alone that Smith and Usman were jailed. So they were jailed, the chairman and the other directors. It is important to get that right.
Okay.
They were jailed. They were jailed, and you see, I've already referred you to where to get the data.
So anything else that connected them to any kind of fraud in what you're saying now in any other country, Kenya being one of them, would be conjecture. Is that what you're saying? And not anything related to the reasons as to why they were jailed?
Not conjecture. In the charge sheet that they faced, there was one dealing with the operation in Kenya. Another charge sheet dealing with some of the operation in Malawi, Ghana, and what have you. But all these charges, when they put together, the one where the conviction was made was in the place where there was a direct trail of money from Smith and Usman to some recipient who was involved in negotiating for this money. And the money that was sent by Smith and Usman to this account was about 30% of the value of the ballot papers that they had initially received.
And we don't see anything like that happening with the Kenyan case?
In the Kenyan case, I don't want to go into the specifics, but
since
you have asked me, I'll answer you. There is nothing like that in the Kenyan case.
But we are not denying the fact that chicken, the code word that was being used by Smith and Usman, was an indicator of irregularities that were equally taking place in Kenya.
No. When this trial was going on in Britain, and the Crown Prosecution Services brought all these documents, and the Kenyan Ethics and Anti-Corruption, I think they also sent their fellows there. It is only this time when the Kenyan journalists, press, came to know of this chicken gate. And because those fellows were convicted and jailed, we took it for granted that Kenyans and those who were co-conspirators in one project. In Kenya, it was the agent who mentioned the word chicken gate. Now, I'm not saying that in Kenya they didn't receive money. I cannot be a witness of character in that respect. But I'm saying the reason why the Mzungus were jailed had nothing to do with the Kenyan case.
Okay. We're going to take a break at this point and come back and continue with this conversation. Major James Oswago, former IEBC CEO, is here with us this morning. We're looking into the details of Chicken Gate, which, by the way, many have said has been unresolved in terms of what happened in the Kenyan case. And we now have a new IEBC for all intents and purposes coming in. And how do we deal with a new IEBC under the shadow of issues that happened previously? And how would we say that such a thing would not happen again? But let's look at the details of what actually did happen and if there was a major issue. We'll continue after this at 23 minutes to 9. No, but they did in Kenya.
In Kenya, it is what the agent call it.
Yes.
I've also told you that the same Smith and Usman in the same court proceedings were taken to court regarding the operation in the countries I've mentioned.
Yes.
they didn't call it chicken gate in all those countries, but it's the same thing.
Okay.
And the jury absolved Smith and Usman of corruption in all those other areas except in Mauritania.
Did they absolve them of all those other countries, or was the evidence so clear and damning in Mauritania?
And if
I need to clarify on that.
When you're talking to court, you are charged with 3 offenses. Count 1, count 2, count 3. The court can find you guilty of all the 3 counts. Or the court can find you guilty of only 1 count.
Yes.
It doesn't matter the number of counts you face in court. What matters is the one where the court finds you guilty.
Or if there is enough evidence to then now say that it is clear without any kind of, if the evidence is resoundingly heavy, that we can see that this actually happened, that they would not focus on these other issues because maybe it was not resoundingly obvious that something happened.
If there was evidence, and one of the best investigative agencies is Serious Fraud Office. And when Smith and Usman was taken to court, they also took the agent from Somaliland. So they charged Smith and Usman, the manager and all the others. They also charged the agent from Somaliland. All these other agents were not charged. They only charged Smith and Usman plus the agent from Somaliland. The court acquitted the agent from Somaliland, but only convicted people from Smith and Usman. They were also acquitted of these other charges from these other countries.
On what grounds? And that's my question.
And
acquittal must come on
Acquittal
grounds.
comes, naturally, when you are acquitted, means there's no sufficient ground to sustain a charge.
Based on?
You see, the reason why they were convicted in Mauritania was there is a direct trail of money from Smith and Usman to that account.
Okay.
So I presume that the acquittal, I don't want to go into the details, but I presume, not I presume, the reason why there's acquittal in those other cases must be there was no direct trail of money from Smith and Usman to their agent or to the people who were mentioned.
Okay.
I think
Because if there were, they would have been convicted just as the one from Mauritania.
we talk about the conviction that happened in Mauritania, but I wanted to look at the fines that were paid and the fact that Kenya received some 53 million shillings from those fines that would go into the purchase of ambulances in the country. So if at all they were acquitted from the cases that were in Kenya, then why again would Kenya receive part of the fines if at all there was nothing?
Because when this case was going on, some of this money had been impounded. The fine that was given to Kenya was not money paid by Kenyan officials. It is not the people who are named in Kenya who paid that fine.
It is Smith who paid the
It
fine.
is Smith and Usman was money that already they had, and that money they were supposed to send to their agent. So now it was said, instead of sending it to your agent, because of the way you do your businesses, this will now go to something else. Because Smith and Usman had all these other businesses in Africa, okay? So it is found clearly you jail the people in Mauritania. But now, because there is this other money that we have here, and we cannot assign it to a specific individual, that is how the money now was given to be used for those purposes we're talking about.
Then if that's the case, Mr. Oswago, there is the fact that you were taken to court.
Yes.
And it is said that there was an injustice that happened. There were kickbacks that were received, and Smith and Usman was given a tender of around 1.3 billion shillings. And you went to court, you went through the judicial process, and you are actually convicted of the same.
No. The Smith and the chicken gate trial is still ongoing.
Yes, it is.
And it's good you mentioned that. What you've told me, and you are right, was that in the newspapers, it was people receiving bribes,
Yes.
inflating prices,
yes.
and inflating quantities.
Yes.
Then they would skim off and distribute. So when somebody is charged in Kenya with chicken gate, you would expect that person to be charged with a charge which the charge sheet discloses instead of X number of ballot papers, you inflate it to X plus 1.
Yes.
All right? Instead of paying 20 bob,
You're
you
paying
paid
65.
160. Now, the charge that I was charged with, and why I think you people are using my charge as chicken gate, and it is not chicken gate, because what I'm charged with, first and foremost, it deals with what happened in 2010, not 2009.
Which was what?
Which was
And the charge that I have, and when you want to know what a charge is, you read the particulars of the charge. The particulars of my charge are, these are the particulars,
yes.
I'm not going to the law that was broken.
Okay.
The particulars of the charge say, on 7th of May, 2010, James Oswago awarded a contract for the supply of ballot papers to Smith and Usman for the by-election in South, 57,000 ballot papers for the by-election in South Mugirango constituency, which happened in 2010. So here the charge says 57,000 ballot papers, and James Oswago wrote the letter without taking to the tender committee. That is the charge that I'm facing. All right? Now, according to the narrative you gave me earlier, if it was within that narrative, you should be hearing ask for 57,000 ballot papers when they should have been 20,000. Or charged 3 shillings when they should have been 100 shillings. Yeah. But the charge I face is that I wrote that without taking to the tender committee. Not that it was inflated, number one. Number two, with minimal diligence yourselves as journalists, you can find out what was the voters register in South Mugirango by that time. It is on public domain.
Major Oswago, did you inflate the numbers of
I
ballot
didn't.
papers that were supposed to be taken for this election?
I never did.
Did
One.
you inflate the cost?
No. Remember, we are talking about 57,000 ballot papers. But before I answer you, let me also give you some information, which I know you don't know. That is 2010. In 2012, the one of 2010 that I'm talking about, I've told you, that was done by the commissioners. I just wrote the letter.
Okay.
Okay, it was not my decision. It is important to know that. I just wrote what the commissioners told me, okay? But in 2012, I did something with Smith and Usman.
Which is?
And this time, it's not the commissioners who did, it's me who did. I gave Smith and Usman, in a direct procurement, a contract for the printing and supply of ballot papers. How many? 14,500,000. And how much? 3.6 billion.
What does that portend?
Well, I'm telling you that in 2010, the charge that I have is that I wrote the same Smith and Usman to supply 57,000 ballot papers.
Yes.
But they're saying that didn't go through the tender committee. And there's a reason for that, because
So it was a procedural issue for which they said if this
You were in
procedure
court,
did
yeah.
not follow the channels that it was supposed to by law, then there would be a reason then to sanction you for that.
That is they were saying the procedure. That is the procedural
Did
issue.
not follow the procedure.
You didn't follow the procedure, but there are two things with that. And again, I hope I'm not going to the merits,
Yes.
but you've asked.
Yeah.
One, there was no tender committee. Why? Because there were no staff,
Okay.
number one. Number two, the decision that was made was not mine. Because there was no tender committee, the decision was made by
tender, did it follow the procedure that
now
lacked in 2010?
we had all those. Now we had the tender committee.
So we agree
but it was still direct procurement.
So do we agree that in 2010, because you did not follow the procedure, you broke the law?
There was no tender committee. And there was no tender committee because earlier on, the Election Commission of Kenya had been disbanded.
Okay.
And the Election Commission of the IEBC, when I arrived in IEBC in January 2010, I was the CEO. I was the first staff who arrived. Thereafter, there came about 9 directors, then 17 managers, all the others.
Okay.
They recruited me, then they recruited everybody else.
That's understandable. And why it's important for us to be quite on these details is because we sometimes say it's clear, but it isn't. That at the time, with the realization that there was no tender committee, which is required for these processes to take place, did you say that this decision I am making, knowing full well that there is no tender committee in place because of certain circumstances, disbandment of an IEBC, however, procedures are still taking place within the office, was that made clear that under those circumstances, you were still taking this decision?
Very good question. Let's go to 209. Commission has been formed, Interim Independent Election Commission. They walk into office, there's no staff. 2 months later, they are required to run by election in 2 constituencies. They don't have staff. Those commissioners would have been perfectly right to write back to the speaker and say, we don't have a commission. We can't run an election. They would have been perfectly right to do so. Right or wrong?
Right.
They could have been perfectly right. But the issue of representation is so large and so high that they felt very well. Whatever can be done should be done so long as it is done in public interest and in good faith. So in my case, when it came to our doing this decision, and the IEBC Act and the Constitution of Kenya, I think it is Article 249, says that any employee of a constitutional commission who makes a decision in public interest and in good faith is immune from criminal or civil prosecution. Why is that so?
Okay.
Why is that so? Because government exists to solve problems. And if there is a by-election, like there was in 2009, in 2 constituencies, and you are the IIEC, and you are told, do that by election, you could easily come and say, well, we don't have the means.
But that's what exactly has happened.
Yes.
Right now, we are dealing with quite a number of vacant positions, whether it as member of parliament or at the ward level, for the very same reason that one would have expected that at the same time you also would have said, why would I be asking for the supply of ballot papers from an organization that is already tainted in very many countries, knowing full well that an IEBC has been disbanded? There are no staff. According to the law, we cannot run an election without these staff in order. It is happening currently, and that's why this conversation is important. That today, in 2024, 2025, we cannot run by elections because an IEBC doesn't exist. But Major Oswago, years ago, is asking for the supply of ballot papers when you know there is no office in place, but you want to run an election. How?
There's a
Because
difference.
let me just-
a very good question.
Yeah.
And I'll answer you.
Let me just top up on that.
Before you stop up.
Okay.
Very good question. You are contrasting things which are not the same. Today, there are no commissioners. That time, decisions have been made in Kenya which says where you need commissioners, commissioners are part of the definition of a constitutional commission.
Right.
And there are cases when, for example, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission undertook some prosecution when they had no commissioners. And the High Court said, no, there was no commission. So in 2009, there were commissioners.
There were commissioners.
What was missing was staff. But not that there were no staff. There was some staff seconded about, but not permanent staff.
But the critical staff that you needed to have.
Today, there are staff about 1,000 plus, but there are no commissioners.
However, for the process that you needed to run, Major,
Yes.
the staff that were critical to that process didn't exist. And could we not then say that it is on that procedural misdemeanor that there was a problem? Because knowing full well that the staff were not in place, you still went ahead and made this request. The question is, knowing that there were no staff in place that were needed for this critical assignment, why did you still go ahead?
And
The only-
to just ride on that, the critical stuff that you're talking about is the tender committee that would then go ahead and approve this and give the rubber stamp. And here you talk about public good versus the procedure. But here we talk about public good is not only making sure that the people of those constituencies that needed by election need representation, but public good is equally following the procedure and the laws that put you in place to ensure that you undertake a credible election.
I agree. The only thing that I'm telling you is, first, I was not there in 2009. By the time I came in 2010, already they had used that procedure to do the elections in 2009. And there was a by-election in Sinyalo and Bamachoge in 2009, before I came to the commission.
So they had already made a mistake.
If you want to call it a mistake, yes. But
According to the
me,
law, you
according
shouldn't
to the
have
law.
done it.
No. The law does not say, the law is not defeatist. The law is not that. Because number one, I've told you, the Constitution provides you can make decisions so long as in public interest you are immune from prosecution. The only instance when you're prosecuted, make those decisions, but when they find that there was self-interest, then it is not public interest. For example, if you make a decision without, let me talk about the 209 one. If they made a decision without, for instance, taking to the tender committee, okay, and it was found later that they received money, that would be different. That is why it is critical that in the UK case, there's direct trail of money from the company to the recipient. In this other one, there isn't. See? That is why the law gives you immunity so long as you do it in public interest. That is I didn't write it. That is the Constitution.
That is the Constitution.
And that is the IEBC Act. Those are not my own private letters.
Okay.
And they say, and they know why. And the reason why they know that there's some things that you'll do in public interest, which you must do not being encumbered by procedures and what have you.
Okay.
So long as you achieve that larger goal.
We're going to ask a question about whether any shillings actually did pass from one point to the next. And we're doing all of this in relation to what is currently happening today,
Right.
when a new IEBC chair has been nominated by the president, and that we now see commissioners who will then join him to continue in this work.
Very well.
Major James Oswago is here with us, and we're looking at what bedeviled the IEBC then and hoping that it doesn't do so going into the future. It's 9 a.m. Good morning. Because of this functionality not being in place. The Major James Oswago, who is a former CT, is here with us. We've walked through about an hour of the discussion around two issues here. When there was a case brought about you, Major, as well as the Chicken Gate scandal case, which, for all intents and purposes, are yet to be resolved. One of the major issues that we talked about as we're coming in was the decisions that were made by your office, letters that you wrote, in the interest of the public, for public interest. Now, we do know what the Constitution says, that in the interest of the public, or for the best public interest, that decisions can be made where you can actually make direct procurement, right? And that there are certain circumstances under which you can do that. The overriding question is that if that is in the public domain, it is clear, it is in the law. There is an act by which the commission is bound, and that the agents of the commission, the CEO, one of them, is bound. If that is public knowledge, why would there still be a case in court if it is well understood that direct procurement can actually be made in public interest?
One, and you see, you have to go back, and this is a counter narrative for you in the media, and I say that with a lot of apologies and a lot of love. The Kenyan electronic media sets the agenda for what we think about and what we read. So when the Kenyan electronic media picked on the issue of the chicken gate, when it happened in Britain, and it was presented the way you have already told me, that has become the narrative, even when better facts have emerged. I've already told you a few minutes ago that don't believe me, but do access that site. And I've given you 3 or 4 sites, which you yourselves can access. Now, I'm not talking of the two of you. And I've been wondering, why is it that the Kenyan media themselves have not done it? Sometimes back, I myself downloaded the material that I picked from that site. And I took those to 2 journalists. One in the Standard, is no longer there with the Standard. Another one with the Nation, he's no longer there with the Nation. They know themselves. And when my biography is complete, I'll write their names. And I took this bundle of documents to them and I said, listen, this thing you keep on calling chicken gate, where is it inside here? There's a mention of chicken in those in the emails. And clearly the person who is writing chicken could be doing so for 2 reasons. One, he's saying that the employees or commissioners of IEBC, that is Interim Independent Election Commission, were actually to be bribed.
Yes.
That is one possibility. The other possibility, we are Kenyans, could be this is a way of getting money from his bosses. Simply saying, I'm going to give them this sort of money. He gets the money.
But he wouldn't actually do that.
He won't do that.
Okay.
Now, that can happen. But you can only discount that if you can now show that money was actually given to these other fellows.
With evidence, watertight.
With evidence.
Okay.
Now, the law says, and you asked me, sir, earlier on, that because Smith and Usman were found guilty elsewhere, that means there could be a presumption that they are guilty, they are corrupt. That is a fair question. But a presumption, however strong, never amounts to a fact. We are dealing with the law. You are taking somebody to court where you can deprive them of their liberty.
To say that if you did something here,
this is not a
it
place.
is not guaranteed that you do it somewhere else.
This is not a place to take guesswork. You know, and there's a reason why when you go to court, they produce witnesses and they produce documents.
Okay.
So what is required, what was done in Britain was serious fraud office not only produced documents and witnesses, but showed that money actually there were linkage, isn't it? So here in Kenya, I don't want to comment on the details because I might be saying, tomorrow they can even cancel my bail.
This is true.
But because this is a matter of great public importance.
It is.
It has been an editorial upon an editorial upon an editorial. So it is true that, and I told you earlier, I'm not a witness of character to tell you that money never exchanged hands. But I'm telling you, where is the evidence? Mere suspicion that it could have happened does not mean it happened. Number one. Number two, the fact that they were jailed in London cannot be used to judge what happened in Kenya.
Okay.
It is the same company, and it is a fair thing to say because they were bribing fellows in London, they also bribed people here and elsewhere in Africa. And by the way, it can be possible.
But what you're saying here, and just for purposes of clarity, what we're saying that even this, as it goes through the legal channels, because like we've established, this is still an ongoing case. The matters are yet to be resolved. We know this. But I hear your argument to be, in this case, is that, sure, these things may have happened, but you cannot come towards a courtroom and not present anything that is strong in evidence, that it cannot be conjecture, it cannot be by association, that you
Absolutely.
associate a crime based on an institution that may have committed the same manner of a crime somewhere else. That the law demands that you provide evidence that would essentially put this thing to bed. If you do not, then we should not have a case. Is this what you're saying?
The problem between you and me is that you are more intelligent and more articulate than I am. So you put it better than I would have done. I wish you were seated here. You see, what you have said exactly is what maybe I should be saying. That all those things could be true. Courts don't exist to listen to rumors and innuendos and suppositions. Courts listen to go through the painstaking work. And what a court looks for is very well, like in Mauritania, money was found. There was a trace of money. Now, I mentioned earlier on to you that I dealt with the same company 2 years later, and myself, and I told you, it was direct. Do you know what direct procurement means?
Yes.
Direct procurement
That
is
you
the
can
license.
go to one single bidder, for
But
example.
do you know what it means? Direct procurement is the corrupt person's license to steal. That was my chance to steal money if I wanted to. Because here I'm giving Smith and Usman 14,500,000 ballot boxes, and they pay 3.6 billion. I could have negotiated. But this thing has been audited twice, audited by Public Accounts Committee, audited by the Auditor General himself. Not even one observation.
There was
That means
no
it was clean.
observation, there was no linkage.
That
between,
means, and this is what I did in 2013, all right, for the 2013 election. But now you are tying me to what happened 2 years earlier, on which it was, first of all, 57,000 ballot papers only. This one is 14,500,000. Now, if you can find that one individual procured 14,500,000 and spent 3 points, and that was done well, surely, why don't you give that man the benefit of doubt? Even that one you did well, unless there is evidence. There's a way of thanking somebody for doing a good job. And in Kenya, that is the way you get thanked. That you do a good job. And why do I think it's a good job? It is a good job because the ballot papers that were procured in 2013, none has been done in the other two elections. In 2013, we procured ballot papers. They were delivered where they were required to be delivered. In 2017, the procurement was shrouded in a controversy about the relation between the supplier and the government. In all the documents they're going to use against you.
Yes, or they should.
They must.
They must, yes.
In Kenya, they'll give you. So I have all the documents that are required to prove this case.
Yes.
There is nowhere where it mentioned a figure.
And who did this information come from?
It came from you in the media.
No. The The
Which
question
one?
I'm asking.
Which one?
The documents that were presented in court. Who were the originators of this documentation?
The ones in my trial.
The ones that you say is necessary for any evidence that is going to be presented against you must be prepared and presented in documentation.
By the ones in court.
Yes.
No, originally, they are collected by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. When they are satisfied, they take it to the Director of Public Prosecution, then it is brought to court.
Right.
So when you go to my file today, in these trials, and it is a public document, you will not find where it says Chicken Gate was 10 million, 100 million, 50 million. You will not find. But in the media, I have had Chicken Gate A, Chicken Gate B, Chicken C. And let me ask you something for you now. Chicken Gate happened in 2009.
Yes.
And you yourself, you've said it has been a constant subject of editorials. And I've told you that they mentioned my departed daughter. And I'm not mentioning that for empathy, but you can see how traumatizing that is. To be told that because this thing delayed, because your daughter died. Now, take it was 50 million, and it's 209, sure. Let us be at least balanced, kidogo. Between 209, sir, we have had Anglo leasing, hundreds of billions. We have had SGR. If you are to believe Jimmy Wanjigi, it was initially supposed to be 50 million. It ended up being 500 billion. We have had Eurobond 1, hundreds of billions. We have had Eurobond 2, hundreds of billions, many. Why is it that every time these are not mentioned as frequently as you mentioned Chicken Gate, and yet Chicken Gate, by your own acknowledgement, is 50 million? Now, I must say, 1 shilling
Are we
of
trying to
public
say
money,
that because one amount was more than another?
1 shilling of public money.
Are you saying, James?
1 shilling of public money is too much.
Absolutely. But are we saying that because one amount was more than another, that is the merit for which it should be mentioned more than the other?
I'm saying it is a journalistic principle of fairness. It's a journalistic principle of merit. In journalism, when somebody says something about you, when I say something about you, journalism will always see another counterbalancing opinion, isn't it? Because you seek to be fair.
To be neutral.
To be neutral. Now, in that spirit of neutrality, you keep on a deluge of Chicken Gate, Chicken Gate, Chicken Gate. If it was our concern for the hemorrhage of public money, if that is what is anguishing us, that's what's annoying us so most, I would expect Chicken Gate to be somewhere in the page 100. What would be in the page 1? Not our own president once said, not the current one said that Kenya loses 2 billion shillings a day. That means by today calculation, it's a trillion. 1 trillion shillings a year out of a 3 trillion budget. That should be a permanent thing in your headlines.
You see,
And yet, for one reason or the other, maybe it sounds nice, for one reason or the other, whenever I go to court, I hear in the Chicken Gate trial.
So then that's the question. Sorry.
So I ask myself, is this because we are concerned about loss of public money, all of it, or because there is something about this Chicken Gate that is so enamoring to people in the media? What is it?
You see, James, when you look at the Chicken Gate
But
scandal,
do you get my point first?
I hear you.
Do you hear?
I hear what you're saying. Yeah. Now let me continue. Now, when you talk about the Chicken Gate scandal that you talk about, it is on the premises of that an injustice was done to the people of Kenya.
Yes.
There is, we would say, an assumption, or if you want to put it like that, that Usman and Smith did an injustice when it comes to that, because even when you're talking about it, there is the fact that there was the procedural aspect of procuring these ballot papers that was not followed. And when you talk about the public good one would look at the summation of it, starting from the public good of representation, which we all agree. But then again, it is public good on the procedures and the processes under the law that ought to be followed. You may argue that if it is done on the basis of public good, you are immune from prosecution. But on the flip side of things, a Kenyan would say, I want you to equally follow the law as put down. And that is why we are asking the question about the chicken gate scandal. And we're also asking the facts that have taken you to court. What are the facts? What are the merits? And it is your honors to explain to the Kenyans who are listening.
I agree. I told you, there are things I would want to talk about. And the things I would want to talk about, number one, I would want to explain to you why there's been this delay. All those people who have been called and they have come to court, this is what, because you see, you can take somebody to court, and I don't want to be taken for sub judice. You can take somebody to court and call 100 witnesses. It is not the number of witnesses that the courts are looking for.
It is the substance.
The courts are looking for the cogency. The courts are looking for the relevance of that. So sometimes they can take you to court and bring 1,000 witnesses. None of those says anything relevant to the charge. But every time I go to court, there is a representative of the media. And I would have expected you in the media to say, we have been in this court for the last 20 times, and this is what you're hearing. Why?
Okay, so it seems as if what you're looking for, James, is that for somebody to explain to the public what is happening, for which there is no evidence that would essentially put the nail in the coffin of this case. That nobody is explaining the issue as to what really happened. That's what you're saying.
What I'm saying, if I said that is sub judice. What I'm saying is that there is this public fascination or fixation with chicken gate. The popular one, isn't it?
There's a public
but there is the reality of chicken gate in the courtroom. And what is in the court, the charge that I have in court, is not what is talked about in the press. Why? Number one, you talk about 50 million. The one I have doesn't mention any figure. Number two, I've just told you, they have called 27 out of 30 witnesses. I wish I was allowed to say what I want to say. I can't say.
Okay.
What I wish I could, I can't say. Number three, you complain in the media it has taken too long. I wish I had the leeway to explain my vision why it has delayed. But I can't. But the point is, what I would like the Kenyan public to know is that, number one, there was a chicken gate, there was a chicken gate in London, and there is what we call chicken gate here. And by the way, when I'm in court, it is myself with 2 charges. The agent has got, I think, 9 or 12 charges. And there's somebody else who has got 1 charge. It's a lady whose name I don't want to mention.
Sure.
The agent has got 12 charges. And me, I have 2. And you know, when you go to court, you never hear about the agent. It's James Oswago. And these things traumatize and these things destroy careers. I will still repeat what I've told you earlier. That you compare like and like. You cannot overemphasize each to do with 57,000 ballot papers when the same individual has procured for you 14,500,000 at 3.6 billion. Give the devil his due also.
Okay.
So let me just ask a simple question. Let me just ask a
Give
simple
the devil his
question.
due also, because if you don't, we are taking the public for granted.
Let me ask a simple question.
Yeah.
3.6 billion shillings that you're talking about, at that particular point, the procurement that you did, was it direct or did it...
Direct.
Direct.
Yes.
Did it follow the procedural process?
Of course it did, because by
It
this
did.
time now...
There was...
No. It was... First, first you must know.
I'm headed somewhere.
First of all, you must
I'm
know.
headed somewhere.
Wherever you are headed, you must know that first direct procurement is a license. The reason why the law doesn't like public procurement is
A
prone to
license
abuse.
to cheat, to steal.
Is
yes.
prone to abuse.
Yes.
If somebody can be trusted and does a successful ballot public procurement, that person is entitled to a certain level of evaluation of integrity. It cannot be sullied by something that happened years earlier where
When the
there is
person
even
was
no
not there.
evidence.
So the second time when you procured 3.6 billion, it went through the proper procurement process. Yes.
Yes.
Let's go back to the 57,000 ballots. There is an allegation that it did not follow the procedural process. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. And based on the admission that we are having here, everyone is subject to have a certain conversation around the first procurement process, which has seen you go to court. And rightfully so, Mr. Oswago, as you are in court, you will argue your case. But as we sit here, you have admitted it did not go through the procedural process, and that is why you're in court.
I didn't say so. I've just told you that in court they are saying that it should have gone through the tender committee.
Yes.
When they say you go through the tender committee, the writer of that law assume there is a tender committee. When there is no tender committee, for some good reason, then you do something else. These things are in the Public Procurement and Disposal Act.
Yes.
The Public Procurement, and listen to me, the Public Procurement and Disposal Act also says that there are decisions which, if you make in public interest, you are immune to prosecution. The word that the law that gives immunity to public office holders like IEBC is very strange because you find it in the Constitution, but you also find it in more or less the same words in the IEBC Act.
Yes.
You find it in the Public Procurement and Disposal Act, and I think you also find it in the Public Finance Management Act. The same phraseology in about 3-4 different laws. It can't just be there for cosmetics.
And exactly
The
why
reason
I asked
it is
the
there,
previous question
the
that I
reason
asked
it is
Major.
there, the reason it is there is because the law recognizes that public interest overrides everything.
And yet, with the recognition that public interest overrides everything, this case has been in the courts for almost a decade.
Yes.
If not more. And we talk about this representation of this phraseology in more than 4 occurrences. So it is public knowledge and understanding. So who wants this still in the public eye without closing it if it is a publicly recognized and accepted law?
I wish
You wish you
I wish that you could give me. I wish you were sufficiently powerful to give me immunity.
Unfortunately, I
I
can't.
would tell you this is where we are. I would even tell you why I'm in court in the first place.
Okay.
Okay,
I'll
so
tell you.
one of the questions that you asked is that why is there this obsession? And I think this leads us now, segues us out into a different conversation. Why is there an obsession with this thing? And I believe that there is an obsession when it comes to, number one, funds that are meant for public procedure. If there is even an allegation, you know, evidence notwithstanding, if there is an allegation that somebody has pinched a penny here or has their fingers in the cookie jar, we will be encapsulated with the whole idea for a very long time.
Yes.
Given the situation that the country is in 10
Yes.
years ago, today, economically,
Yes.
that there will be a question. And anybody will get the scarlet letter on their chest. It doesn't matter who you are, what you do. If there is even a whiff that maybe somebody has their fingers in the cookie jar, that is where everybody becomes so enamored with that issue. So now we have a new IEBC in place, all things remaining constant, and that the parliament will do its thing. And I go back, that will the ghosts of the past still not continue to haunt this whole idea, and that we go in thinking this person might be puppet, this person might be pawn, to then be able to do the same things that is alleged happened previously. That's where the whole, madness runs around this thing. How can we say moving forward, and it may be that you may not be the best person to tell us that, but these are things that happened in the past. They're still haunting this commission till today. It doesn't matter who comes in. How can we be sure that moving forward, we won't have the same things?
I can assure you, without risk of doubt, this thing you call chicken gate cannot affect IEBC. Because how much is it? I keep on asking you. IEBC handles billions and billions and billions every year. If IEBC can take care of the billion that it has in a good manner, IEBC should be guided by the principle that judicious use of public resources. Our elections are some of the most expensive in
the world.
In Africa, maybe in the world.
Yeah. Yes.
And there's a reason why our elections are expensive. Our ballot papers itself and the Kenyan currency have got nearly the same security features. Why do they have the same security features? Because we don't trust each other. Because you don't trust each other, you must have those security features. Because you have those security features, your ballot paper costs more than it costs to print ballot currencies elsewhere. That is one reason. There are many other reasons which one can say. IEBC, for the future, who cannot in any conceivably be influenced or derailed by what happened in the past, particularly in Chicken Gate. IEBC has many issues to deal with. The issues that you hear about in presidential election petitions. And those are the issues that IEBC should address its mind to. But if you ask me, I can list for you what I think they should deal with. And I don't think that is what you are asking me. If you ask me what I think they should deal with, I'll tell you.
What should they deal with?
Essentially, they deal with
The new commission. Number one, the new commission must understand where it is coming from. From 2012, from the first commissioners under IEBC came into being in 2011. Between that time and now, only 2 commissioners out of about 18 commissioners who have been recruited finished their 6-year term. If you count the number of commissioners that IEBC has had from around 2011 up to date, there are around 18. Only 2 did 6 years. The Constitution says commissioners are employed for a period of 6 years.
6 years, non-renewable term, yeah.
Only 2 have finished. All those others have had their tenures terminated prematurely. All right? The reasons are either internal or external. So one, we have to find out, why is that happening? Why is that there's such a rapid turnover? Why is that instability in IEBC? Number one. But the instability in the tenure of IEBC's chairpersons is also reflected in the instability at the level of CEO and senior staff. Just like they roll out commissioners unceremoniously, either they resign or whatever, is the same thing they do with senior staff. From the first CEO of IEBC was James Oswago. James Oswago did 3 years, 6 months.
Yes.
James Oswago was followed by another lady, brilliant lady, good lawyer. And she was there for 1 year, 5 months, 6 months. Then they brought another one, Chiloba. He was there 3 years, 2 months or 3 years. Then they brought this other one. A CEO is supposed to last 10 years. If IEBC commissioners were going through their full term, today they would be having their second CEO. Instead, I think they're on the fourth one or the fifth one. But the fourth one is a bit strange because the fourth one was in an acting capacity for 3 years before he was confirmed in 2021, just before the election.
Okay.
Right? So you find in IBC an unacceptable instability and disruption by the turnover of the CEOs.
Okay, I want to stick.
So you are bringing these fellows in. You are bringing these fellows in. These fellows must be aware. Whoever was recruiting them must have considered the fact that we are sending these people in this environment which is historically unstable. So what kind of characters do we want to go there? Point one. Point number two, where is the cause of this disruption? Is this internal or external?
See? And that's what I want us to take a break and come back to look into. Because is there an external cause of disruption? And what do we see happens as a result of the constant disruption? What effect then does it have on the commission, but also what effect does it have on the country overall when we see these constant disruptions? We'll come back and look into some of those. It's 20 minutes to 10 o'clock. James Oswago, former IEBC CEO, is here with us. We're talking about issues that matter. We'll be back after this.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
His laugh was iconic.
That's when I learned how to stop wearing boxer shorts. You know what I'm saying? You know, do this.
His personality was legendary.
No, to be frank, you're fine. Yes.
With his unrivaled talent, he gave us countless moments.
Can you see?
Yes, I can see.
Right.
Yes.
Saturday as we celebrate learning.
A hyena eats more meat more than a lion. A hyena eats 14 kgs of meat. A lion eats 10.
Talent.
So I've also played in Supply for Women in Kenya.
Educative.
Hello. That's how you say hello.
Entertaining. Here on your #1 Premier Kids show.
Hello and welcome to Health and Wellness, where we explore new health trends, wellness tips.
In the mental space, we never ask what is wrong. We always ask what happened.
We feel the pain of our patients.
And ways to just embrace a happier and healthy life. Small changes can make a very big difference to your overall health.
For this intervention, we don't use any general anesthesia.
Oh, really?
So the patient is awake with us, talking to us throughout the procedure.
If you start having chest pain and you're sweating a lot and you're not doing any physical activity, that's a very ominous sign that you're actually having a heart attack.
To be honest, we've actually done a CS with Mulika Muizi. You're bringing Muliquad for you to remove that baby.
So let's incorporate these tips to our daily routine just to ensure our immune system is healthy and strong.
Join me, Zaitun Ali, every Sunday at 6 p.m. on Health and Wellness.
none of them the kind of tumult that you find in IEBC, particularly at the level of commissioners and at the level of and at the level of CEO and deputy CEO. There must be a reason. There must be a reason why, when a new cohort of IEBC commissioners are recruited, you can more or less predict this will last 2 years. Because on average, none of them has lasted. And the first chairman lasted 5 years. Chebukati finished his term. But like I told you, all the other commissioners, none of them has finished the 6 years. It ranges from 3, and sometimes it's ridiculous. Rosalyn Akombe was employed and Rosalyn Akombe could arguably be one of the brightest commissioners that IEBC has ever had. If you read some of the things that she writes.
And yet didn't finish.
And yet Rosalyn Akombe came in January, and October she was gone.
Why do we see this high turnover? What's the problem?
You need to first do a bit of research, and you don't go far. When Rosalyn Akombe resigned, she wrote a 100-page letter, not page, a document. She wrote a letter, then wrote a document, 100 pages. Those 100 pages tells you the way the commission was by 2018. And it is a very sad reading, including to the extent that commissioners go to a meeting and you take a particular position. When you leave the door, you get a call from some powerful office in the land telling you, why were you talking like that? This is a commission meeting. This is Rosalyn Akombe saying, you are in a commission meeting and you take a particular position on a particular issue. When you leave the door, you get a telephone call from some very powerful people. She does not mention them, but we know them. In the last Serikali Yongine, who would call? And they were in parliament, those powerful fellows. They would call, why are you talking such stupid thing in the commission meeting? So what do commissioners do? Commissioners therefore go to those meetings already knowing what to say because you got instruction from outside.
Okay.
All right? It's no longer commission.
So is it not independent?
Akombe even says, it went so bad that commissioners would not take tea in commission meetings for fear of being poisoned. This it's not James Oswago creating. This is what Rosalyn Akombe herself said in a document which you in the media never even looked at.
So, James, if we look at the disruptions that happened in IEBC during your time, the influence and the troubles bedeviling IEBC during your time, were they internal or external, if you care to share?
All problems that IEBC has, not only in my time, but also thereafter, they are external. That is the origin, that is the source. But those external sources will not walk in anniversary towers and say, we have now arrived. They'll go through some
proxy
somewhere, either through a commission or senior staff. But whatever the intention is not to build, is to disrupt. And to disrupt to serve personal interests of those people outside. So, and those people outside are powerful potentates in their own positions. All right? So it is not just the commission where I was in. It is the commission that followed thereafter. I've told you that James Oswago served 3 years, 6 months.
Yes.
The one who followed him served 3 years. No, the one who followed him served 1 year something. The lady who followed me was deputy CEO. And she had been deputy CEO for 2 years, right? Then I leave, and she becomes acting CEO. Then she's told to act for 1 year and a half. Then she's Who stays 3 years in an acting capacity?
Well, it has practice along many sectors where that actually does happen.
But what does it mean? You know, you can't confirm yourself.
No.
Why was the commission unable to confirm a CEO that they themselves have given an acting capacity? Why?
So with the election cycle in this country, the electioneering process in this country seems as though we have a lot of problems coming from outside affecting the credibility and the moral standing that is the commission, which one asks, as we approach 2027, the commission, you say, has a lot of work to do. But what guarantees do we have that the commissioners who will be in place will not be there with a direct order to achieve certain things in the commission? How do Kenyans trust IEBC?
Because Kenyans look in the wrong place. You see, institutions don't defend themselves. You see, the judiciary cannot defend itself. IEBC as a constitutional commission cannot defend itself. IEBC requires you to speak for it. And for you to speak for IEBC, we must be careful. What is it that ails IEBC? For as we see it from outside, we interrogate it and we say the origin of this is from this source.
Is the commission independent? The first word of this commission is independent. The independent. That means that it is able to operate void. It should be able to operate void of this external influence that you talk about, these external disruptions that we hear all the time. But if we look at the last decade of practice, the last 15 years of practice, it would appear as though the element of independent is the one thing that doesn't exist for the commission. Also based by your own admission of things that you've said, Rose Nakombe's dossier that she brought out, years ago. Is there any element of independence when it comes to the IEBC?
Can I read something for you?
Please do.
I'm asking you a question, huh?
Yes.
Now, as we are going, this is about 2018. As we are going to the election 2018, I'm giving in the context. Election has been nullified. And they have ordered another election.
Yes.
The Supreme Court has said, in the intervening period between this annulment and the next election, IEBC were to do certain things. And the Supreme Court graciously itemized those things. In that short time, there was, NASA was the competitor. NASA had come up with what they call minimum irreducible demands.
Yes.
Those minimum irreducible demands included removing some staff.
Yes.
Who had been mentioned adversely in those things. Chebukati, having read what the Supreme Court said, and having listened to these minimum irreducible demands, and the minimum irreducible demands were communicated by now Musalia Mudavadi, who was a big party in the NASA government.
Yes.
So Chebukati has committed himself and said, we will do all those things. Then Chebukati finds himself unable to do the things he's committed himself to do. And an election is due in about a week's time.
Yes.
So what does he do? Chebukati issues a 6-7 page barua, which he says is written to the Kenyan people, just before the election.
Yes.
Now, I'm answering your question, which you asked me.
On the independence
of the
commission.
Yes. So a part of the thing that he says is this. I'm reading from Yukitiwake. I have made this point on numerous, well, today I want to confirm to you of full technical preparedness for this election. I want to state categorically that I shall not go down in history as the national returning officer that plunged the country into further crisis than I had found it. It is already painful to be on record as the chairman of IEBC that presided over a presidential election that was nullified by the Supreme Court. Paragraph. I have made this point on numerous occasions to my colleagues at the Commission. I have made several attempts to make critical changes, but all my motions have been defeated by a majority of the commissioners. Under such conditions, it is difficult to guarantee free, fair, and credible elections. I am convinced that without critical changes in key secretariat staff, we may not have a free, fair, and credible election. I ask the staff who have been adversely mentioned to step aside and allow the project team to function without interference. And yet, the burden placed on me as the chairman is huge. The expectations of Kenyans have on me are high. Yet, I cannot move forward with a divided commission. I cannot move forward when presidential candidates refuse to put their personal interest aside and for once serve the country. Lastly, one of those is that I would rather bow out with my name inter. No, that's not important. Says, once there is a political agreement as a result of dialogue, when there is a genuine commitment to let the commission work independently, when all commissioners and staff truly commit to serving the country rather than partisan political interest, and when we work together to create a conducive environment for Kenyans to express their sovereign will, it is only then I can truly be confident of having a credible presidential election. Only then I can commit to serve as the national returning officer in order to deliver a free, fair, and credible condition. Okay. Let me and my commission do our job, and we shall deliver. Interfere as you've been doing, and we get stuck as a country. Anyone who truly loves this country will not want to be destroyed by the selfish ambition of a few. Now, this is the chairman of the commission. And he's basically saying...
And this was after the first election.
The first one is gone.
Before the next one happens.
He's going to the second one. Mm-hmm. And he's saying he's stuck. He's saying he goes to the meetings and the majority overrule him.
Yeah.
He has committed that staff should be removed. He can't remove them. And he's saying he can only commit to a free, fair election if he has done those critical changes. The critical changes which he's saying he cannot do because the staff have refused him to do what his work. That is the condition where IEBC was in 2018 as we move to that general election.
Did it get
better? Is the chairman.
It
could get better. This is the chairman. And this was about a week or two before the election.
Yes.
Now, remember, earlier on in his tenure, a few months earlier before the first election, he had said they were not able to do a credible election. Then he changed his mind. Then he said this. Now, are these the words you asked me? And I'm trying to answer your question. You asked me how autonomous, how independent they were.
Yes.
Are these the words of the chairman of a commission which is independent? Those are not my words. Does that show you?
An independent commission.
This, to me, these are the lamentations of a defeated individual. This is the manifestation of a commission that is not only dysfunctional, that is not only rudderless, but adrift.
Do we what we see now? I mean, you will definitely have different individuals now because that was give or take, some 7 years ago. Do we see now that just because individuals would change at the helm of the commission and that you have new commissioners, you have a new chairperson, new individuals across board, would the same lamentations, overt or hidden, still be the same thing?
Have you read the book by Isaka-san? Ahmed Isaka-san wrote a book. He was the previous chairman.
Yes, he came here and discussed it.
Isaka-san, in his book, in different words,
said the same thing.
In his own words, but in deep. And that book is big. You read the book. I was telling somebody it's also a book of grievances. 3/4 of it is a book of complaining. But what he's saying in that is a longer extension of what Chebukati is saying in this.
Are we likely to see the political class finally drop their demands and let the commission to work?
When Kenyans, starting with you in the media, I told you earlier, so long as you are pointing your fingers at the wrong places, you will not get the solution done. But when we eventually come to the realization that this is the source of the problem, why is Chebukati talking the way he's talking? He's defeated. And yet we accept the result. Now, do you get the impression that we moved on so far from 2017 that now we are in a different orbit, now we are in a different planet? Or do you get the impression that it's a continuation to the same? Before you answer me, remember,